Governor, but mostly as a mom. And we are all parents or grandparents, and this is a very serious issue. I've used the word, when I've talked about opiate addiction or heroin addiction, I use the word epidemic. Now, I don't really have the stats to back it up, so I'm not going to cite you a report that says that. But as a parent, it seems to me like it's an epidemic. I think Director Bourne potentially gave me the statistics I need, unfortunately. When you hear the rates of opiate seizures and heroin seizures, I think this is an epidemic. And I appreciate that Governor Kasich and First Lady Karen Kasich have allowed us to go around the state and have kickoff events like this here in Youngstown, Start Talking. Director Bourne spoke a little bit about it from a law enforcement side. I'm sure you could speak to the law enforcement professionals in the back of the room. We heard a sheriff say on Friday in Mentor, they're not as successful as they'd like to be on the law enforcement side kicking this problem. It's going to take a community of people, a state of people with multiple initiatives attacking it from every perspective in order to eradicate what I think is one of the most serious issues our youth faces. And there are a few young folks in the room today. And as a mom, I would beg you, just say no. Don't start to begin with. When you read about or hear about how addictive opiate prescription drugs are, or heroin, if you just say no, that's going to give you the best results. We want you to grow up. We want you to be happy. We want you to realize your dreams. You're not going to get there if you choose to use drugs. From a rehab perspective, and I think we're going to hear a story about this, it's very difficult. These drugs are very addictive, and even after you go through, if you're fortunate enough to go through a rehab program, it's very difficult. It is a challenge you will face every day of the rest of your life. We heard Derek talk about his father. You don't want to be that way to your parents, your grandparents, or your own kids. And the best way that you can do that is just say no. I think the Start Talking program is very important because it's simple. It doesn't ask us to do extraordinary things. We don't have to be medical professionals or be able to deal with mental health issues from a medical perspective. We can be parents, we can be community leaders, we can be coaches, we can be law enforcement, we can be teachers, we can be elected officials, and we have many here today. Each one of us can make a difference. Each one of us has a role to play in keeping youth off of drugs. I've heard compelling stories. We're reading about it in the news, the actor who unfortunately appears to have overdosed on heroin. It's everywhere we go. It knows no bounds. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what your demographic, socioeconomic status is. It doesn't matter where you live. These drugs impact families and people across every boundary. So we're in this together. We can solve this problem together. We must solve this problem together. Every life lost, whether it's actually physically lost to an overdose or one that's lost because of an addiction that just can't be beat, is a life we can save if we just start talking. It is alarming to me in a good way, so that's probably the wrong word to use, but to know that if you just talk to a middle school student about drugs, the use of drugs, say no, how to say no, start providing the tools of mentorship, and the fact that just talking about it gives them a 50% chance of not becoming addicted. That's a pretty positive outcome to just talking to our youth about drug addiction. I guess I will challenge every one of us in this room, no matter what your contact is with youth, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, coach, teacher, superintendent, former NFL player, all of us. Let's give our kids an excuse to say no. You come up with it. I don't know what they do in high school programs for sports programs, drug testing. Not suggesting that that's the answer necessarily. But let's give our kids a reason to say no. No, my coach will, whatever it is. My coach says I can't do this because. And moms and dads, you know, it's got to be serious. We got to be serious to give them the excuse. Give them the way out if that's what it takes for them to say no. Because it will be a life saved and a life worth saving if we can give them that excuse. And I think we can all do that. It's just that simple. Let's get our kids to say no. Let's get our kids to stay away from something, this addiction that is killing far too many of them. I guess the last piece of advice I will give, and I'm not a medical professional, and there may be some medical professionals in the room. But if you have a young one at home, high school, middle school student, they have an injury, sports injury, maybe they have surgery, monitor the pain medication that your child is receiving. Count them. Make sure they don't take them when they're not supposed to. Make sure there are as many left as you thought there should be, and make sure that that child is taken off of that prescription drug, that pain pill, as soon as their medical professional says it's okay. You'll hear too many stories that an addiction began because. And some of us may say, well, gee, that's just an excuse. That's not what really happened. I know real life stories that happened, and it is true. And it seems silly, even if it's a high school student. But we can do that to save our kids. I know you're all here because this is an issue you care about. You care about your community, you care about the kids in your community, and you care about your state. And together, we will all get this done. So I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for everything that I know you're going to do to protect our youth so that they can realize their dreams, whatever they may be. And with that, Sam, are you our next speaker? I'm going to introduce Sam, and I watched a video of his presentation. It's very compelling, and he deserves a lot of credit for being here. He being here, telling his story, is going to make a difference in at least one person's life, and I think a lot more than just one. People like Sam have a lot of courage to be here, to talk publicly about what he's been through, and I suspect, at least I know I would offer personally, and I suppose people that are in Sam's position might as well. If you need our help, call us. We will be here for you. Everyone in this room is going to be here for the person who calls us and says, I need your help. So please give a very warm welcome and make him feel comfortable. Sam.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank Tracy and Lieutenant Governor Mary Taylor for having me here, as well as all of you for listening to my story. A little nervous, so bear with me. But I struggled with heroin addiction, and I hope that my story will reach some of you and hopefully give a little perspective on this issue. When I was young, I knew I would never become a drug addict. I grew up an average kid in the suburbs playing cul-de-sac kickball and catching bullfrogs at the pond. Pretty average upbringing. And in high school, I was a captain all 4 years in both football and lacrosse. I was a principal cellist in our orchestra as well as in a number of outside orchestras. I was pretty much a model teenager on paper and got pretty good grades, got accepted into Ohio State. And this summer going into school, I kind of got into a party drug scene, went to a lot of music festivals, and started experimenting with drugs. But when fall rolled around, I buckled down. I was a physics major, so I didn't really have time to do anything but study. But my friends and I were very studious, and we quit doing drugs. All my friends were recreational drug users, but we buckled down and did really well in school. And every night, after class, I would go over to one of my friend's houses and study. And I remember going over one night, and he had taken the mirror off the bathroom wall, and he and 3 or 4 of my roommates were snorting little blue pills off of the mirror. And that night, I tried Percocet for the first time. Over the next 8 months or so, use increased and frequency increased until we were using almost every day. And one night I got in a fist fight with my best friend over who had stolen the last pill out of the bottle. And the next morning I called a friend of a friend that I knew was a heroin addict and had him get me a bag. And a year later, I had lost 45 pounds. I had been to the ER 3 times. I had sold everything that I owned of any value, and I had stolen a lot of money from a lot of good people. And I still thought that I didn't have a problem. And about a couple months later, my parents are two of the most loving, amazing people that I've ever known. And they came and kidnapped me from school and brought me back to rehab. And that was about 2 years ago. And I've been in recovery since then. And this problem, like I said at the beginning, I knew when I was young that I would never do drugs. But this addiction doesn't attack any single demographic. It's a problem in every race, every socioeconomic level, every neighborhood. You're lying to yourself if you don't think it's in your neighborhood too. And we need to start opening up the conversation with kids. That's, as we've heard from Tracy, it cuts the likelihood of them using in half. And we need to stop trying to scare kids, and we need to just make them comfortable with talking to you and know that you're there to help them and love them like we know you do. And that's going to make all the difference. This is an epidemic, as we've heard from the Lieutenant Governor, and it's not slowing down. But with this initiative and with the support of the governor and the rest of the great leaders we have, I think we can truly make a great impact on this and save a lot of lives and stop my story from repeating itself. So thank you, everyone.